People may question how I cope with having like 4,000 Sonic figures of just the character Sonic alone. I personally like it because even though I'm essentially just buying a figure of a character I already have, different companies make their Sonic figures look so unique. We've gone through many different companies producing figures of Sonic, Resource, Toy Island, Jazzwares, and now we have TOMY at the helm. A majority of Sonic fans believe TOMY's first introduction to Sonic figures were their Sonic Boom line. Little do many people know that TOMY has made a modern Sonic figure before, and in fact, their history with Sonic products can be dated all the way back to 1992. Today, we are going to look at how far TOMY has come with their Sonic figures. We'll be looking at the past, present, and future. The early 90s, and right now Sonic is on top of the world. Merchandise is spreading like wildfire at the nostalgic KB Toy Store and other toy locations such as Toys R Us. God rest its soul! It's actually quite hard to pinpoint an exact year Sonic figurines started to come around, but my guess is 1993 or 1994. I mean, it makes sense. By then we had characters like Sonic, Tails, and Robotnik. That alone is enough characters to work off of. You got 2 TV shows, 3 hit games, and a comic book series. At this time, many companies had the license to create Sonic collectibles, but good old TOMY comes around and introduces some of the first figures of Sonic the Hedgehog. Sort of. These figures actually have no posability and are essentially miniature statues. This set of figures is not only pretty rare, but had many unique releases as well. At first, they came packaged in these oh-so-classic looking cardboard boxes. Notice the checkerboard scheme and that old logo. They came in 2 sizes, the small versions and the slightly bigger versions. They were all the same sculpts though, just resized. The original wave had 2 Sonics, one tapping his foot and one doing the finger wave, Tails, and Dr. Robotnik. These 4 were the first to be released. Then in 1995, the miniature versions were re-released with an array of new characters. Yes, I'm talking about the elusive Sonic and Knuckles figures. While I believe the first wave were mainly in the UK but kind of found their way over to the US, I'm almost positive this Sonic and Knuckles figure line was strictly a UK thing. Each pack came with 4 figures. We got the re-releases of Sonic and Tails, but we actually got a brand new 3rd sculpted Sonic, a new sculpted Robotnik, a Knuckles, and get this, a bunch of Badniks. These were the very first Badnik figures to ever exist, and for the absolute longest time, were the only Badnik figures. Before Jazzwares' 20th anniversary line, if you wanted any Badnik, you would need to desperately hunt down this set. Now we live in an age where we have the Jazzwares Badniks and the Kid Robot Badniks as well. Finding these figures, in their boxes no less, doesn't happen often. Let's take a look at these 2 Sonics I have. First thing to note is that like all these figures had to have been hand-painted. Almost every time I've seen these figures, they always look completely unique. Not in the good way though. These figures are known to have sloppy paint jobs and, well, I'd be lying if I said they didn't. Look at this one, Sonic's eyes aren't even painted correctly. Nevertheless, Sonic looks, well, really weird. But he only looks that way by today's standards. Back in the 90s, no one really knew how to make Sonic spikes, so TOMY gave him 3 rows of flat spikes, kinda like how Sonic looked in the cartoons. It's interesting to note that TOMY clearly looked at artwork of Sonic at the time and based their designs off of it. I have to say, out of the 2, I do like this version of Sonic more. Maybe because he's painted better, I'm not sure, but I really like how he has his arms folded. These figures stand around 2 inches tall. TOMY would continue producing obscure Sonic items, but their contract eventually ended somewhere in the late 90s. TOMY's next big step with the Sonic license was years later, around 2010. TOMY made an exclusive Sonic Colors action figure that could only be obtained if you pre-ordered Sonic Colors in the UK. The figure also came with specific wisps from that game. I don't own this figure anymore. However, on my old channel, from when I was like 12, for the eagle-eyed of you, I did a horrible review of it, so I'm just gonna showcase some footage of that. This figure was unique as it had Jazzwares-like joints, but they would lock up. You couldn't move the arms backwards, you'd have to twist the arm to do so, and his elbows would only move forward. His pupils were also rather small. While he almost looks like a Jazzwares figure, he was much heavier and actually stood around 4.5 inches, as opposed to Jazzwares' 3-inch Sonic line. He was a nice looking figure, but these had a tendency to break easily. Notice how weird Sonic's legs look, for example. Yeah, that was a fix I had to do. When I received my Sonic in the mail, he was in his package with his legs completely broken off. And this wasn't a simple ball joint fix like a loose limb on a Jazzwares figure, no. This was like borderline unfixable. So while the sculpt was good, it was pretty flimsy and awkward to pose. In 2012, TOMY came back with the license to make more Sonic figures, this time more than just Sonic. While these weren't boxed figures you could find on pegs in the store, these were blind box figures consisting of Sonic, Knuckles, Shadow, Metal Sonic, and Super Sonic. TOMY also made Sega All-Stars blind box figures of characters in their cars, and blind box figures of characters' heads as keychains. I actually own both the blind box figure and the blind box keychain. The whole reason I made this video was because lately, people have been saying TOMY isn't good at making Sonic figures, but like, compare this figure to the next one we'll be taking a look at, and I beg to differ. Sort of like the original 90s figures, these figures aren't actually posable, but are made of a flexible plastic so they can kinda move. But the more you move them, the more likely it is they'll break, so they should really just be display pieces. This Sonic stands close to 3 inches tall and is smaller than a Jazzwares 3-inch Sonic. Notice how dark his shade of blue is, and the lack of paint on his shoes. The paint on these figures really don't look the best, but bear in mind these only cost like $4 to $6 to buy. These were really cheap figures to buy, so they must have been cheap to produce. I will say, however, I do like Sonic's head sculpt. His spikes look really nice and his overall face is molded well, just not painted well. Despite its flaws, perhaps we all should have appreciated this figure when we had the chance. Cause little did we realize that after this, no new modern Sonic collectibles besides the GE plush line would have released for almost 3.5 years. It's 2014 now, and the entire online world is buzzing with knowledge of a new Sonic game and TV show coming out called Sonic Boom. Man, what a different time. Regardless of what people claim, I'll have you know before the horrendous Sonic Boom game came out, people were excited. Sonic Boom genuinely looked like a good game, and we had just come off the heels of Sonic Colors, Generations, and the alright Sonic Lost World. Every Sonic fan mutually agreed that there was no way Sega could mess up so badly again, but whew, what a time. I'd really like to make a video on what Sonic Boom was before it became. Hell, I was hyped for Sonic Boom. I even bought this stupid Sonic Boom retail display and now I'm stuck with it. Ah well. After Boom's tragedy, I decided to not keep much of my Boom stuff at all. I have these 2 metallic figures and these 2 plushes my friend Jay got me for Christmas, which I think are adorable, so just like the Colors figure, I'm going to be using footage from an old review from 2014. TOMY had the rights to finally make a brand new Sonic line, not a blind box line, not a non-articulated line, no, a full-fledged toy line with articulation, accessories, plushes, and more. Their first and most common Sonic Boom toy was the 2014 3-inch figure, who was actually a tad smaller than the Jazzwares figure. This was interesting as it was an entirely new design for Sonic. He was thinner, taller, and had more details. Sports tape, Enderbeam buttons, more spikes, it was interesting. All Sonic fans can mutually agree these figures left a lot to be desired after Jazzwares had just finished their Sonic line. These figures only had like 5 points of articulation when Jazzwares had like 12 to 14. The quality was also very different. Bad paint jobs and breakable limbs led many fans to be really upset. But being honest, I think we were all just a little bitter. Sonic, despite his Boom design, looks rather good. His face looks fine, he's actually frowning instead of smiling for once, so that's interesting. TOMY did a good job molding in all the details, and while articulation was small, you could still get some new poses out of this. Look at this. Here's a picture of Sonic holding a popcorn that I posted on Twitter. Hey, you should really follow my Twitter. Anyways, the figure looked pretty good, all things considered, but he wasn't modern Sonic. In 2017, the moment us collectors were all waiting for had finally came. A brand new, good quality, modern Sonic toy line was announced. In it, we got Sonic, Knuckles, and towards the end of the year, Tail. And who would be producing it? None other than TOMY. As Boom began dying out and their classic line was making good profit, it was time for modern Sonic to return. And just in time too for the new game Sonic Forces. I actually own 2 modern Sonics, the Comic Pack and the Forces Pack. I already opened the comic pack, so I can do a real review of this figure, unlike the Boom and Colors one. Sonic stands, again, around 3 inches tall, and is actually closer in size to a Resource figure as opposed to a Jazzwares one. Look, guys, I'm gonna be honest, I think this is one of the absolute most game-accurate Sonic figures ever. His articulation is the same as the Boom figure, but I don't mind it. I want my figures to look good over being able to move in every which way. Seriously, when I see this figure, I feel like he was extracted straight out of the newer games. He's seriously really good looking. People say his pupils are too big, but I think they actually look pretty good, and the paint on him is very good for TOMY standards, considering their track record. I think my favorite part about this figure is the tips of his shoes have a slight bend to them, so that when you put Sonic in a running pose, it actually aids to the pose rather than looking stiff. Yeah, there are a few paint leaks on him, especially around his ears, but that's okay with me honestly, and that seems to be an issue with my figure and my figure alone. I seriously consider this a much better looking figure than the Jazzwares one. Yeah, Jazzwares had a nice sculpt and no doubt carries some nostalgia, but this figure seriously hits the nail on the head. I honestly love it. And so, here we are. We talked about the past, the present, but what about the future? Well, TOMY has shown their catalog for the figure line, including new figures for their modern Sonic line and new plushes as well. TOMY may have had a rocky start at the beginning with Boom, but now I believe they are really hitting it out of the park. In the time span of almost 20 years, TOMY has seriously come such a long way. I seriously wonder if current TOMY employees are even educated on the fact that they've had the Sonic license before, and if they're allowed to see what things have come out of their department years ago. As Sonic continues to grow, so do his products, and I'm glad to see TOMY has taken the Sonic license in with open arms so many times. They have shown us that they will continue to strive for their best efforts towards this line, and their past releases are a good example of this. I think these differences speak volumes about how good a company TOMY really is. So everyone, this has been my little TOMY retrospective, and I hope you all enjoyed. I'll see you next time.